Welcome to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hemmerker. In each episode, she'll talk with your favorite romantic suspense authors. They will take you behind the scenes of the writing process, giving excerpts from their writing, and share stories about their writing life.
Among the Innocent by Mary Alford. 10 years ago, Leah Miller's entire Amish family was murdered, and the person believed responsible took his own life. The case is closed. Or is it? Since that time, Leah has moved on with her life and has joined the police force. But when an Amish woman is found murdered with the same MO, the decades-old case turns red hot. Has everything Leah thought she knew about her family's murder been a lie? Leah joins forces with the new police chief, Dalton Cooper, to fit together the missing pieces of the puzzle. But when secrets from the past begin to surface, an unexpected connection between them is revealed. Could it be that the former police chief framed an innocent man to keep the biggest secret of all buried?
Hi, and welcome to this episode of The Romantic Side of Suspense. I'm your host, Sarah Hammerker, and I am so glad you joined me. Today, I'm delighted to have two returning guests, Mary Alford and Robin Patchen. So thank you and welcome back to my show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Thank you very much.
Now,
it's good to be here again.
Thank you. We're going to start the show and give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about your book. So Robin, I'm not going to say the name because I messed it up earlier. So your book. For some reason, that first word.
The first word, gotcha. Yeah, my book is called Lineage of Corruption. And, I don't usually talk politics, and I'm very careful to stay, never use liberal, conservative, I never use parties, but there's a little politics, a little political intrigue. And anyway, so that's sort of where it started. It started for me looking at our Senate right now. We have that, 50-50 split. So one person can curtail the plans, of the parties. So I decided to make up a character whose father is that one senator who refuses to vote for a bill. And I thought that would be really fun. So they're pretty really want to get that bill passed. And so there's all sorts of trouble caused trying to force his hand.
And that never happens in real life, I'm sure.
Yeah. Total fantasy. Our politicians are above reproach in every conceivable way.
Yeah, okay. We're going to leave that and go on to
Wise woman.
Among the Innocent, tell us about your book.
Really? Well, Robin, your book sounds fantastic, so I'm going to have to read it.
Well, thank you.
Among the Innocent, it comes out this June. Well, you're welcome. It comes out this June 7th, so it's right around the corner, and I'm getting very excited about that. It's through Revell Publishing. It features the heroine, Leah Miller, and Leah was once an Amish woman, and her entire family was murdered 10 years earlier. So Leah left the faith, and she was adopted by the former police chief and his wife, and she was brought up as an English girl, and she followed in her adopted father's footprints and became a police officer as well. So the book actually starts with her being called out on a call for missing persons. And it turns out it's in Amish country. It's her neighbor's house. And the young girl is named Beth Zook, and she's found in the same barn where Leah's family was murdered 10 years earlier. Mm-hmm. And there's a note from the killer addressed to Leah to tell her that he is back and he's coming for her.
Woo. Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah. We're just going to end the podcast here, and I'm just going to go read your books. They sound
got some interesting stuff.
Yeah. What I like about both of them is how you're taking, just really different topics and different suspense and creating it. Like, Robin's is political and yours, Mary, is more, I mean, the Amish don't seem very suspenseful, and yet things can happen to any kind of thing around here. So how do you, here, I think this might be a good question for our listeners. How do you come up with the topics? What draws you to a particular topic? Mary, do you want to take that one first?
Well, I love reading Amish books. I started reading Beverly Lewis and fell in love with her stuff right away. So I've been reading Amish for a while now, but I also like suspense. So I added a little suspense into the story. And to me, that is just a neat idea to have a Amish community, which is considered, innocent in simple ways, and throwing in a really dangerous situation, as in this case, it's a serial killer that's come onto the scene and has actually returned to the scene. So you have the whole good versus evil thing going on. And I think it really brings it out when you've got the innocence of the Amish and then such a really bad guy.
Yeah, and I think that at least in your lineage, of corruption, Robin, and you have the same kind of the kind of surprising, maybe not the innocent, but in politics, you don't. I mean, it can be. We call it cutthroat, but people generally aren't, dying.
Right.
So
You're not,
Exactly.
yeah, they're not usually killing each other off, and I really loved that idea of having a character, in like being that one voice standing against evil in his party, and then it was like, but how do you make that scary? Like that's so I had to bring in some people, so there's not actually senators killing anybody. It's not that. It's someone ancillary who has a lot of money to make, I think. But yeah, it's interesting. I love to try to figure out how to take sort of the headlines and find a way to make them suspenseful and, bring in that scary little bit to it. So that's fun for me.
Right. And I think also what's interesting, and you both mentioned this word, how you're pitting almost just that good and evil being played out in the pages of our books,
Mm-hmm.
and how that really resonates with readers, especially because, I know the books that we write, that we have our Christian faith in them. And we also, the bad guys, they get their comeuppance at the end, evil is punished, good is overcome. How do you, kind of work with those topics in your books as well? Do you feel like that is what readers want?
I definitely do. I think that we see enough of the other kind of stories where the bad guy doesn't get his in the end. I like that, they call those whole stories, where good is good, bad is bad, and good wins. And I like to write whole stories because there's enough of those bent and broken stories in the real world. We just have to read the paper to get those. So,
yeah. True. Mary, what are your thoughts on that?
Very fallen world. I agree completely. We live in a very fallen world, and it's nice to get away from the reality that evil doesn't always get punished right now. So It's good to have the book where the hero and heroine, everything works out in the end, the bad guy gets punished, and there's usually a happily ever after at the end of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think and I also think not just that, because we write suspense, obviously there's some mystery, there's something like a serial killer, somebody's trying to, do something that's wrong. So they want that part to be resolved happily, but we also have the romance between the hero and the heroine. And what I love about, like you were saying, Robin, about whole writing, that, they get their happy ending too.
Yeah.
And that's important.
I think it is.
They've gone through a lot to get there, so it's kind of nice.
Yeah, they earn it, don't they? They earn their happy ending.
Yes, very much.
They have to fight hard for it. They're such fun stories to write because you have to really put your characters through the ringer, and by the time they get out the other side, they are changed. But how could you not be, and you're in those situations. I think it's fun. I think it's fun to write these kinds of stories. It's my favorite. The
journey is
the
fun
mystery
journey
part
to
is
go
hard.
on with your reading.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
a really fun and exciting journey that we get to be part of and we get to share with the readers. And it has a great ending, and it's just all the way around fulfilling, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're great, fun stories. Yours sounds really good. I love serial killer stories, Mary.
That seems a little odd to say.
I love writing about serial killers.
And that's even odder.
I know. Too much crime TV, I'm thinking.
I know. They are, well, they can be very complex villains to write, I think. And any villain can be complex. So I always like to think when I'm writing my bad guy, to make sure that they are, human, and they're not, just super bad. Right? How do you both kind of balance that? I mean, a serial killer is going to have, a reason besides the fact that he's evil, right? So Mary, why don't you talk, how do you write your killers or your bad guys in a way that makes them seem human in the whole midst of their evilness?
Right. Well, there's a backstory. You create a backstory for each character, and that includes the villain. And you have his story where, in this case, he went through a lot of things when he was a child that affected him growing up. And you can kind of sympathize a little bit with him. But again, you also see, I would never go down that path, but I can understand a little bit why he did. But I think it helps to sit and write down their story as well, where they came from, what their family was like, how they got to be where they are now. And it really does help create a really bad guy, I guess.
Yeah. Robin, how do you tackle the bad person in your books?
I think it's helpful to interview my characters when I don't have a really strong sense of who they are and why they're doing what they're doing. And that sounds dumb because they're coming out of my head. But if I ask them the right questions, I sometimes get some really surprising answers, which is fun. And so my best villains are the ones that I've had a nice conversation with. They've explained to me why they do what they do and what they really want and how they're not evil because they want what they want, because, even the worst people in the world justify their actions. And so, you have to figure out, how are they doing that? How can you justify this? So yeah, I think that's fun. Bad guys are my favorite, and I don't have a lot of room, and my books have gotten so long, I don't have a lot of room to show a lot of stories from their points of view. And I miss doing that because I love writing bad guys' point of view. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I enjoy, or at least when maybe one of their henchmen or somebody, I enjoy, kind of having their point of view and their thing in there too for my longer books. So and I think the complexity of all the characters in our books really give it that, that realistic feel to them so that readers can connect with them, right? Because we want them to connect with our characters. And I think one of the reasons as Christian writers that we want them to connect with our characters and their faith. So, and we're almost out of time, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you incorporate that faith in your books to make it seem real? Because, not everyone is, we don't go through life without any ups and downs. And so our characters need those ups and downs, and our faith kind of go up and down. So how do you handle that? Robin, why don't you go first?
For me, I always have, I like to write Christian characters. I prefer to start with them somewhere on the journey, but they always have something that they don't really grasp about the Lord or about themselves. And so that becomes like their spiritual journey. For instance, in Lineage of Corruption, her spiritual journey is really about understanding who she is. And valuing the way that the Lord made her, even if she has found reasons to not like the way the Lord made her, but learning how to value the good things and understand the bad things are forgiven. So the way I do it is I bring in one element and I try to teach, the character that one way to improve their faith, to understand the Lord better.
That's lovely. And Mary, how do you incorporate your faith in your characters?
Usually my characters will be either in a struggle or they'll be coming to the Lord in the book. With Among the Innocent, Leah has gone through so much. So she has pulled away from God. She's kind of blaming God for everything that's happened to her family and to her. While the chief of police, which is Dalton Cooper, he has come about a different way because he's gone through some things in his life and he's lost some loved ones, and his connection with Leah is pretty great that she doesn't even know about. So he has really come to God before we get into the book. So his faith is growing stronger as he deals with this case, while Leah is slowly coming back to God during the case.
Oh, yeah. I love it. And both of you were talking about, kind of like their faith journey. And I love that language because, it is true, because none of us are just this static. We're just walking down the center line of the road and nothing ever happened, it always. So I think it's really nice that we have in our books, we can show all the different aspects of people and how they handle situations and how their faith impacts it as well.
Yeah, I think that's real life, right? It would be not true to say that, you come to Christ and everything is okay. It's just sometimes it gets harder. Sometimes it gets worse, because we have a journey. The Lord wants to teach us things, and we have an enemy. And
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you both for being on my show. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
You have been listening to The Romantic Side of Suspense. I'm your host, Sarah Hamricker, and I've been chatting with Mary Alford and Robin Patchen, and you can find out more about them and their latest books with the notes for this podcast, and I hope you'll join me next time.
Lineage of Corruption by Robin Patchen. In the world of big money and big politics, nobody walks away unscathed. The people of Coventry never suspect that Josie Smith, owner of the local coffee shop, is the daughter of a powerful senator. She went to Washington to serve constituents, but her desire to do good morphed into a desire to win at all costs. When one of those costs grew too heavy to bear, she changed her name and left D.C., vowing to never get involved in politics again. But when her father becomes his party's lone voice standing against corrupt policies, his enemies will do whatever it takes to get his vote, and Josie finds herself caught in a familiar web of dirty tricks. Thomas Wyndham never planned to run for office, but when Coventry's disgraced mayor is replaced by a dishonest appointee, he feels he has no choice but to throw his hat in the ring. He doesn't have a chance against the well-known politician, that is, until he meets Josie, who knows more about running for office than a typical cafe owner would. When Josie finds herself in danger, they form an alliance, his protection for her wisdom. The election becomes secondary as Josie's adversaries close in. But can Josie and Thomas come out victorious against enemies determined to get what they want at any cost?
Thanks for listening to The Romantic Side of Suspense with Sarah Hamricker. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review. You can sign up to receive notifications of upcoming podcasts and listen to previous editions at sarahhamrickerfiction.com.